Good morning. Good morning to everybody. I would like to call this session in order. I invite delegates to take their seats. Please, if you could take your seats. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to declare open the fourth session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. First of all, I want to express my deepest gratitude to Canada, to its government and people for welcoming us to their beautiful capital, Ottawa, and for the hard work to make our fourth session of INC possible. I want to thank all the member states for the confidence and trust you have placed in me as chair of the INC, and in my predecessor, Ambassador Gustavo Mesa Cuadra, to whom I express also my gratitude. I want to thank also the Secretariat and my team for your extraordinary ongoing support. Between INC-3 and INC-4, I have witnessed the active and productive informal work carried out by member states and stakeholders to prepare our negotiations here in Ottawa, and I commend you all for that. Clearly, in this room, there is a strong shared commitment to deliver a legally binding international instrument, a multilateral instrument that meets the scale of the threat to human health and environment we collectively confront. Dear friends, yesterday, April 22nd, was the International Mother Earth Day. The UN General Assembly adopted Earth Day back in 2009 to serve as an annual global call and remind for action to defend, protect, and nurture our shared goal to preserve the environment and human health. As we open this INC-4, I hope that all of us who are here today, this week, can take forward and infuse in these negotiations that spirit of Earth Day. We are here seeking to advance these negotiations and deliver a treaty because collectively we have recognized that multilateral cooperation, this INC process, a newly legally binding international instrument, have a critical role to play in providing the effective and impactful solution needed to end plastic pollution. The spirit of multilateralism is together we are stronger. Let us negotiate with accountability and integrity, grounded in the scientific evidence and facts on the scale of urgency of ending plastic pollution. Let us also approach this task with optimism that is both necessary and possible for us to achieve this new treaty. We know that plastic pollution does not recognize national boundaries. It does not pick and choose which location or who to contaminate. We know that some regions, countries, and communities are especially vulnerable to plastic pollution. Our collective action needs to be inclusive, attentive the diversity of national circumstances and capacities to tackle plastic pollution. We need to recognize and find ways to address challenges of implementation and of transformation and transition. We also need to keep in our minds the economic, social, and environmental costs of the status quo for all of our countries, and many economic opportunities that tackling plastic pollution will generate. We are at a crucial moment in our process, and I can feel and see the goodwill, energy, readiness of every state in this process to take us to a goal that we all long for, which is to end plastic pollution for good of humanity by protecting human health and the environment. Dear friends, we know there are difficulties, but I'm confident that we can find ways to build shared understandings and identify areas of convergence so that we can overcome hurdles. I am committed to do all that I can to work with all of you to achieve that. Our job, our collective responsibility and duty in this INC process is to deliver a treaty that reflects the urgency of ending plastic pollution crisis and that meets the expectations of citizens in all of our countries calling for a change. The message is clear. The world is the message is clear. The world is counting on us to deliver a new treaty that will catalyze and guide the actions and international cooperation needed to deliver a future free of plastic pollution. Let's not fail them. Let us go forward collectively this week with renewed energy and motivation. I call on each member state, each stakeholder to focus on what you can do, what proposals you can make, what ambition you can bring, what flexibility you can show, what convergence you can foster, what common ground you can find. As chair, with my team and with the support of the Secretariat, I will give 100% of my energy this week to support your work. But it is not only with your commitment, it's only with your commitment to producing an effective treaty, your engagement, your energy, and with the spirit of multilateral cooperation that we can make this week and this process work. Let's join hands and work together to deliver something extraordinary, new hope, effective action for the planet and for our peoples. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to invite Ms. Inger Andersen, Under Secretary General and Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, to deliver her opening remarks. Madam Executive Director, you have the floor.
Allow me to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Honorable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Canada, my dear friend Ambassador Luis Villas-Valleso, Chair of the INC, and to all of you delegates, distinguished members of the INC, colleagues, partners, and friends of the environment. Welcome to Ottawa, and to this, the fourth session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee to develop a legally binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, or INC-4. And my deep thanks go to Canada for welcoming us so warmly here and for making us feel home, and to you, Minister Guilbeault, for your leadership and your hosting, of course. Now, 2 years have passed since the United Nations Environment Assembly greenlit these negotiations in which you are participating. And the resolution back in UNEA, I remind you, called for an instrument that deals with the full life cycle of plastic. So to stop plastic pollution, we need to start at the start and end at the end. And that means crafting an instrument that ensures that we use fewer virgin materials and less problematic plastic, that we avoid exposure to harmful chemicals, that we design for circularity, that we use and reuse and recycle resources more efficiently. This is the instrument that we need to protect human health as well as ecosystem health, while ensuring a just transition and space for the private sector to thrive in new sustainable economy. We have seen much progress, both in the 3 negotiating sessions and in the growing global backing for an end to plastic pollution. Multiple polls have shown that the public is heartsick of plastic pollution. Civil society, including indigenous peoples, scientists, waste pickers, women's groups, and local communities have spoken out loud and clear against plastic pollution. Businesses are innovating with new products and asking for clear long-term global rules. The finance sector wants to get behind this opportunity. 160 financial institutions representing $15.5 trillion in assets last week signed a financial statement on plastic pollution supported by the UNEP's finance initiative. Everyone wants this deal. So INC-4 must take and make huge strides towards delivering by narrowing the options of the draft text, by taking tough decisions, by finding compromise, by agreeing on a mandate for intersessional work so that at INC-5 in Busan this November, we can and will finalize an instrument that sets the stage to end plastic pollution. Friends, we've heard from most observers that the right policy and the legal environment will be critical. We're talking about global targets. We're talking about accelerated timelines. We're talking about binding rules and obligations. We're talking about a start and strengthened approach. And there are emerging points of convergence that can create this environment. Those points include, we are seeing convergence on eliminating the uses that are problematic and avoidable. We'll continue to need plastic for specific uses, electrical, transport, construction, but there's a growing agreement that much of the short-lived and problematic and single-use can probably go. We're seeing convergence on the need to redesign systems and products and packaging. There are many initiatives and standards to build on, and a growing number of proposals from member states or consumer goods companies. We're seeing convergence on extended producer responsibility scheme. A growing number of countries are embracing such schemes, are rolling out legislation in the global north, south, east, and west, from which we can build principles and guidelines. We're seeing convergence on innovative funding for implementation, both in the public and the private sector. We're seeing absolute convergence that this transition has to be just. There's a growing agreement that waste pickers must be part of the solution to deliver new, decent jobs. We're seeing convergence on the need to address legacy pollution, while the how and the who remains to be answered. And we're seeing convergence on the need for a reporting framework to ensure real progress is made and build trust through transparency. There are other parts of the deal where there are varying degrees of convergence. And you know what these areas are, but let me just highlight one. because it's clear that positions still vary when it comes to chemicals and polymers of concern. I recognize that there are different proposals on the table. In my view, a fine needle can be threaded that ensures that we land with credible and implementable pathway on this critical matter. I believe that this will entail building bridges to the Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution, which is under negotiations, as you well know, and learning lessons from other multilateral environmental agreements. All of this is within the power of you, the negotiators, to influence at INC-4 this week. Allow me also to remind you that we need to think about the future beyond INC-5 and the completion of the negotiating process. As you will recall, the UNEA Resolution 5.2 that requested me to convene this INC also requested me to convene a diplomatic conference upon completion of the INC negotiations for the purpose of adopting the instrument and convening and opening it for signature. In this context, of course, I would welcome inputs and guidance on the convening of the diplomatic conference. Friends, we can be proud of what we have achieved, but a job half done is a job not done. Time is against us, both in terms of finalizing the instrument, but also how much more the planet can take. As we deliberate, plastic pollution continues to gush into the ecosystems. So I ask for INC-4 that you show energy, commitment, collaboration, and ambition to make progress, and that you set the stage for INC-5 to finalize the instrument that will end plastic pollution once and for all. Thank you.
I thank the Executive Director of UNEP for her remarks, and now it is my great pleasure to invite the Honourable Steve Guilbeault, Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Canada, to deliver his opening remarks. Your Excellency, you have the floor. No, we cannot hear.
De cette quatrième séance du Comité intergouvernemental de négociation
on plastic pollution. I'd also like to underscore that in Ottawa, we are in our traditional territory, that of the Algonquin people. We honor their presence, their long-lasting presence on these lands, and we are grateful to them for having taken care of this territory through the generations.
For these important discussions, including obviously my good friend Inger Anderson, Executive Director of UNEP, Ambassador Luis Vallas-Felicero, Chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for INC-4, and Yoti Matur-Philip, Executive Secretary of the INC. In our opening remarks yesterday, Inger did a great job describing how we got to where we are today with plastics. Plastics became the epitome of consumer culture in the mid-20th century. Cheap, disposable, and modern, or so we thought. We trained ourselves to become reliant on the disposable consumer culture, and it created, as she said, a throwaway generation. We're here today because we recognize that we must throw away this throwaway generation. We need to forge a new global consensus that ends the costly, inefficient, and harmful waste of plastics. Il n'y a pas de solution miracle.
There is no miracle solution. Neither recycling, nor banning, nor innovation alone can lead us to where we need to go. We need to ensure that the committee takes a series of actions so that we can tackle the entire life cycle of plastics and pollution, considering production, design, and elimination. This agreement will be the first to mobilize the entire world around a shared objective, putting an end to plastic pollution.
Mark another significant step in our quest for sustainability after the Paris Agreement in 2015 and the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in 2022. We now need to narrow down the options, identify where there is growing consensus, and make real progress on the agreement. It must include eliminating or restricting problematic and avoidable plastic products and chemicals of concern, establishing targets, and developing design criteria or other targeted actions to enable reuse and recycling. La santé humaine.
Human health needs to lie at the heart of decisions taken on harmful plastics and other chemicals. Science has evolved greatly on the issue of the impact of the omnipresence of plastics, and our decisions need to follow. The discussions which will be held here will lay the foundations for future negotiations. By the end of the year, Canada is firmly committed to moving towards an ambitious and effective global agreement. We'll do everything in our power to ensure that this lies at the heart of international matters and enable us to have a solid and robust agreement.
We're investing an additional $10 million towards the Global Plastic Action Partnership, of which Canada is a founding member. So far, this program has led to 16 partnerships in place with developing countries. We'd like to see more and stronger partnerships. Canada is also contributing $5 million to ProBlue, the global program for the blue economy. This program will help implement the global biodiversity framework by promoting sustainable use of marine resources while supporting coastal economies in developing countries. These are just some of the global programs helping to build international momentum. And for the past 2 days, we felt great momentum that is reflected by the incredible turnout of ministers and delegation from so many countries. We've already made some headways on landing an agreement on these goals. Canada and the Host Country Alliance will engage conversations on key political issues with countries to champion these issues in the coming weeks and months. Yes, we need to meet our mandate to land a deal by the end of the year. But it's like what Adil Najan, president of the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, said yesterday. It's not about if, but about how. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity in front of us, and it is imperative that we get it right. We need to be ambitious, and we need to be effective. That starts by listening to everyone. C'est pourquoi nous avons
That's why we've decided to organize a day for partnerships, to create an open space for diverse points of view on these essential matters, to create a lasting agreement which reflects the contribution of everyone. And this includes indigenous communities, those on the front lines, which we tend to marginalize, as well as the youth, in particular, those who will inherit all of this waste. Fighting against plastics also means fighting against climate change. Fighting against plastics means protecting nature. We need to move forwards on this in order to move forwards on all environmental goals.
Let's make our discussions here count. Thank you. Merci.
I thank the Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Canada for his remarks. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Jyoti Mathur-Philip, our Executive Secretary, to provide her opening remarks. Ms. Mathur-Philip, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and bonjour, hi. Ambassador Luis Valles, Chair of the INC, Ms. Anderson, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, the Honorable Minister Guilbeault, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this pivotal fourth session of the INC. It feels like a long time since we've met, but in actuality, we just met 4.5 months ago. And it's good to see you all again. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the Government of Canada for hosting these proceedings here in Ottawa. May I also recognize that we are on the tribal lands of the Algonquin people, and I would like to thank the elders for blessing this meeting yesterday. Our deep appreciation goes to the donors whose generous contributions have supported the work of the INC and its sessions. Our thanks go to the governments of Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Japan, Monaco, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, the United States of America, and to the European Commission. This is a long list, but I hope it will be longer at the next session. I wish to recognize our chair, Ambassador Luis Valles, who has taken over the mantle for the rest of the INC process. The Secretariat and I remain committed to supporting the process with you. I am grateful to the members of the Bureau who continue to guide and advise us all throughout the process. This stewardship from the regions remains invaluable. Distinguished delegates, we have come a long way since our first session in December 2022. Allow me to remind you that this is a very ambitious timeline, as we have been mandated by the UNEA resolution. In 18 months, we have gone from sharing our views in Punta del Este to an options paper in Paris, a zero draft in Nairobi, and now we have before us a revised draft text which reflects the views of all members. This is multilateralism at its best. And now we must deliver an instrument by the end of this year. This is a promise we must make to future generations. After INC-4, we have only one session left to finalize the agreement. So I call on all delegates here today, seize this opportunity, make these 7 days count, deliver a text that is as close to possible to the final agreement that we all want to see. And we also need a strong mandate on intersessional work that will allow the committee to finalize the instrument in Busan. You delegates know the issues that need to be addressed at this session, and that flexibility will be needed to reach consensus. This is the only way forward. Do not leave the difficult discussions, the difficult conversations, and the difficult decisions until the end. We all are not naive to believe that we don't face challenges in the coming days, but our determination will overcome these challenges, as we have no choice but to succeed. I'm determined to make these 7 days count. I hope you will join me. Before I end, please allow me to take a moment to say thank you to my small but mighty INC Secretariat, and to the many colleagues supporting us from across the UN system, including the best and the brightest from many different UNEP divisions and multilateral environment agreements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Matter-Philip. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me also voice my appreciation to Ms. Asha Challenger for her work as rapporteur in this process. With this, I would like to close this opening segment, and please allow me a 5-minute break for our dignitaries to leave the podium. Delegates, please remain seated. Thank you. distinguished delegates, please, if you could take a seat. Thank you very much. Please bear in mind that we only have one more session left after this week here in Ottawa to deliver in our mandate. I call on all delegations to make the most of these 7 days. I'm sure you are all eager to move into the substance of the negotiations. For this reason, and as we have done it in previous sessions, we will not be hearing general statements from the floor in this opening segment. There will be an opportunity for delegates to provide focus statements under item 4. I will highlight this again when I outline the suggested organization of work under item 3C. Before we proceed to the next agenda item, I would like to invite the Secretariat to provide some logistic information. Secretariat, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, you may follow the plenary proceedings projected on the screen in room 301, located on the 3rd floor, or via the live stream on UN Web TV. The links to access the live stream are available on the INC-4 website. Next, I would like to provide a short remark on the use of the microphones on the plenary floor. To request for the floor, please press the button on the microphone once. The light will turn red. When the chair gives you the floor, the technician will turn on your microphone and the light will turn green. Please speak slowly and clearly to assist the interpreters. As outlined in the chair's scenario note, for general remarks on the revised draft text, the time limit for statements will be 5 minutes for each statement made on behalf of a group of members. Time permitting, observers speaking on behalf of alliances, coalitions, and groups may take the floor after the interventions from members. Statements from observers will be limited to 2 minutes each. A timer will be embedded in the projected image. Delegates are requested to keep within the assigned time when taking the floor, and to speak clearly and slowly to facilitate the work of the interpreters. Delegations wishing to make an intervention in plenary are kindly urged to send their statement via email to unep.incplastic.statements@un.org, well in advance of delivery to assist the interpretation service. Delegations are further kindly requested to upload their statements in PDF format to the in-session documents platform so that they may be published on the INC website. Guidance on the use of the platform is available in the instruction manual previously shared with delegations. Please be reminded that observer interventions will be at the discretion of the chair, time permitting. Seating for observers in plenary will be available on a first-come, first-served basis. Therefore, observers are kindly requested to coordinate amongst themselves so that those who would like to speak are given priority to access the plenary floor to deliver their statement. For time efficiency, observers are encouraged to deliver joint statements on behalf of alliances, coalitions, and groups. We will be operating a dedicated queuing system for observer interventions using a QR code. Instructions on how to use the system will be made available on dedicated observer seats during the afternoon. Meeting documents are available on the INC-4 webpage, and a live daily calendar is accessible on the INC-4 website. Delegations are also invited to consult the electronic screens on each floor inside the venue for latest updates and important announcements. Regional and political groups have the opportunity to hold their daily meetings between 8 and 10 a.m. Room numbers are provided on the screens in the venue. Please inform the Secretariat with at least 2 hours advance notice via email should you require a room at any additional time. Thematic side events will be held tomorrow and on Thursday, that is the 24th and 25th of April, from 1:30 to 2:45 p.m. We also wish to inform that the government of Switzerland is organizing a Swiss break reception that will take place on Friday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. in the Trillium Ballroom on the top floor of the show center. I am pleased to inform you that in preparation for INC 5, The government of the Republic of Korea will host an information desk outside the conference room 3 from 23rd to 25th of April from 9 to 10 a.m. and from 1 to 4 p.m. to answer questions regarding visa application processes for the Republic of Korea, the venue, transportation, and accommodation. We encourage you to visit the booth in case of questions, and we thank the government of the Republic of Korea for making this possible. Outside of operation hours, this information may be accessed through a QR code. Finally, a few words on our venue. The main entrance is by the Colonel Bai Drive, which is open from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. After 11 p.m., it is exit only. Delegates are kindly asked to plan sufficient time to pass through security. The schedule for the payment of the DSA for funded delegates is available on the screens as well. Further information is available on the INC-4 information, which itself is available on the INC-4 webpage. There's a dedicated Wi-Fi network for our meeting with the network name INC-4 Canada. The password for this network is INC-4 UNEP, all caps. Lunch breaks are scheduled every day from 1 to 3 p.m. There are catering facilities on the second and third floor. More details, including their opening hours, can be found in the INC-4 information note available on the session website. We are also pleased to announce that the Government of Canada will be offering free coffee and snacks from 11 p.m. on evenings when contact groups may be in session. Delegates are reminded that food and drinks are not allowed in any meeting room. Delegates are further reminded to please not leave your belongings unattended in the conference rooms and refrain from reserving seats, as UN security may remove your belongings. A lost and found counter is available on the ground level of the show center where the cloakroom is located. The Secretariat and the host country have made great efforts to eliminate avoidable plastics at this meeting. We call on you as delegates to also do your part. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. And this concludes our consideration of Agenda Item 1. Distinguished delegates, we should now move on to consider Sub-Item 3B on the adoption of the agenda for this session. The provisional agenda for this session is contained in document UNEP/PP/INC.4/1. Delegates will recall that at its last session, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee agreed to forward the provisional agenda to this session. The annotations of the provisional agenda are contained in document UNEP/PP/INC.4/1/@.1. Before we adopt the agenda, I would like to remind members that I intend to take up Agenda Item 5 on other matters during our plenary meeting on Monday, the 29th of April. Should any member wish to raise any other matters under this item, I invite you to alert me in the course of this week. Distinguished delegates, may I propose that the committee adopts the provisional agenda as contained in document UNEP/PP/INC/.4/1. I hear no objections. It is so decided. The committee has thus concluded its consideration of Agenda Item 3B. Distinguished delegates, let us now consider Sub-Item 3A on the adoption of the rules of procedure. You will recall that at this first session held in Punta del Este, Uruguay, the committee agreed to defer the adoption of the draft rules of procedure until its second session. The committee also agreed that the draft rules of procedure as contained in document UNEP/PP/INC-4/2 will apply to its work on a provisional basis until their adoption, with the exception of the part of the Rule 37 in brackets. At its second session, the committee decided to adopt the following interpretive statement relating the Rule 38, paragraph 1 of the draft rules of procedure. And I read it. The Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee understands that, based on discussions on the draft rules of procedure for the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, there are differing views among Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee members on Rule 38, paragraph 1, and its reflection in the report of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on the work of its first session. Therefore, the provisional application of Rule 38, paragraph 1 on the draft rules of procedure has been a subject of debate. In the event that Rule 38, paragraph 1 is invocated before the rules are formally adopted, members will recall this lack of agreement. I wish to point out that this interpretive statement has also been included in the note by the Secretariat accompanying the draft rules of procedure in document UNEP/PP/INC.4/2. I believe that we can achieve our work here in Ottawa in a spirit of cooperation and consensus, without the need to resort to Rule 38, paragraph 1. I count on your support to ensure that we can work together to make the best use of this session. With this in mind, the draft rules of procedure will continue to apply to the work of the committee on a provisional basis, as decided at its first session, and we remain aware also of the interpretive statement adopted by the committee at its second session. India is asking for the floor. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As India is taking the floor for the first time during this meeting, I would like to thank the Government of Canada for their warm hospitality in welcoming the delegates for fourth session of INC, and also congratulate INC Chair and Secretariat as well as UNEP for organizing this meeting. As we initiate the fourth session to negotiate this very important agreement, India would like to reiterate its commitment to the principles of consensus in decision-making process on substantive issues under the multilateral environment agreements. The approach underscores our commitment to collective decision-making and adheres to the shared responsibilities of the nations. India believes that consensus-based approach in multilateral decision-making is crucial for ensuring fairness, equity, and inclusiveness. It enhances ownership of the outcomes, leading to durable and effective solutions, ultimately contributing to the achieving the objectives of ending plastic pollution. In this context, we wish to emphasize that decisions on substantive matters shall be taken by consensus. Recalling the interpretive statement relating to Rule 38.1 adopted by INC Chair at second session of INC in Paris, our delegation seeks assurances from the INC Chair that Rules 38.1 will not be invoked during the INC meetings until the rules of procedures are formally adopted. Echoing the sentiment of many of member states, India is confident that a commitment to a consensus-based approach will enable us to move forward constructively in the discussions on the substantive issues. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to India. Thank you very much for the statement. I noted. I want to emphasize that I'm very committed to holding all our discussions in the spirit of cooperation and consensus, and count of all of us to demonstrate this spirit by conducting this session without resorting to Rule 38, Paragraph 1. Thank you once again. I take note of your statements. The committee has thus concluded the stage of its consideration of agenda item 3.8. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to consider item 3C on the organization of work. A scenario note has been made available in document UNEP/PP/INC-4/4. Allow me to provide some information. Concerning agenda item 2, entitled Election of Officers, as indicated in the scenario note, no election of officers is anticipated at this session. Under item 4, entitled Preparation of an International Legally Binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, including in the marine environment, I will invite the Secretariat to briefly introduce the revised draft text contained in document UNEP/PP/INC.3/3. I will then invite regional groups and groups of states to present any general remarks on the revised draft text. In the interest of time, and considering how much work we have before us, and to allow us to move as swiftly as possible to work in contact groups, I seek your indulgence to refrain from delivering national statements in plenary. I wish to remind all delegations that they might submit their statements in written through the INC in-session document platform. Only statements submitted by delegations attending the session in person will be made available on the INC website. The statements on behalf of a regional group or group of states will be limited to 5 minutes. Time permitting, I would like to allow space for intervention by observers, with a time limited of 2 minutes per intervention, and I will prioritize those speaking for alliances, coalitions, and groups. As mentioned previously, all delegations may submit their statements in written through the INC in-session document platform. I strongly encourage statements in plenary to be succinct and to focus on general reflections on the revised draft text so that we can move promptly to textual negotiations. I would like to remind delegates that more specific and technical statements can be made most effectively in contact groups. Following this general round of discussions, as per my scenario note and as reflected in the guidance note that was shared ahead of this meeting and made available online, I will propose to establish 2 contact groups under Agenda Item 4, with a view to further advancing the development of the text of the instrument using the revised draft text as the starting point and basis for textual negotiation, as agreed at our 3rd session. I would like to remind delegates that at this stage, I'm only outlining the modalities of our work under this agenda item. We will consider the establishment of the contact groups and the subgroups under Agenda 4 in the plenary later this morning. Contact Group 1 will be mandated to consider the elements addressed in Part 1 and 2 of the revised draft text, including any relevant proposed annexes, and make recommendations to the committee on streamlining the text. Contact Group 2 will be mandated to consider the element addressed in Parts 3 to 6 of the revised draft text, including any relevant proposed annex, and make recommendations to the committee on streamlining the text. Each contact group will be led by 2 co-chairs. Each contact group will divide its work into subgroups along the following lines. In the case of Contact Group 1, 3 subgroups will be required to allow for expertise, time, and workload to be adequately distributed. And for Contact Group 2, 2 subgroups will be required. The work of the contact groups will be further divided into subgroups along the following lines. Under Contact Group 1, subgroup 1.1 will consider Part 1 elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as well as Part 2 elements 12 and 13Bs of the revised draft text. Under Contact Group 1, subgroup 1.2 will consider Part 2 elements 1, 2, 3, 3Bs, 4, 4Bs, 5, 6, 9B, 10A, and 13 of the revised draft text. Under Contact Group 1, subgroup 1.3 will consider Part 2 elements 7, 8, 9A, 10B, and 11 of the revised draft text. Under Contact Group 2, subgroup 2.1 will consider Part 3 elements 1 and 2 of the revised draft text. Under Contact Group 2, subgroup 2.2 will consider Part 4 elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and ABs, and Part 5 elements 1, 2, and 3, as well as Part 6. Each subgroup will be led by 2 co-facilitators. In the interest of time, I will not repeat in detail the information that has already been shared in the guidance note. However, I will seek your indulgence to highlight a few key points that relate to our overall organization of work. Meetings of the subgroups will not overlap with meetings of their respective contact groups. We will work on the basis of 2 meetings being held in parallel. Group meetings will not be scheduled to coincide with plenary meetings. To assist delegates in the preparation, a tentative program setting out a proposed schedule for the first couple of days of our session, including for contact group and subgroup meetings, has been made available on the INC webpage and will be updated regularly. I will work closely with the co-chairs and co-facilitators throughout this week, including through daily meetings to ensure coordination and parallel progress in the discussions in each group. Report back plenary meetings will be convened to allow the co-chairs of the contact groups to report on the progress of their work. I also plan to continue my consultations with members on possible intersessional work, including as the work in contact group progress, with a view of making a proposal to the committee on the way forward. I will also propose under agenda item 4 that the committee convenes a plenary meeting on Monday, 29 April 2024, to consider, following the presentations of the oral summaries by the co-chairs, the outcomes of the work of the contact groups, to also consider the outcomes of the proposed legal drafting group as appropriate as well, and to mandate intersessional work. Both contact groups will expect to complete their work at the latest by the end of Sunday, 28 April, with a view to making any outcomes of their work available in time for consideration by the committee in a plenary on Monday, 29 April. As I have mentioned also in my scenario note, I recognize that I'm proposing different organizational work that we have used previously, but this is a reflection of the complexity of the issues and the need for inclusive progress. This mode of operation allows for flexibility to organize and conduct our work in the most effective manner possible, while preserving full transparency and inclusiveness. I will further propose under this agenda item that the committee consider establishing a legal drafting group towards the middle of the week. I hope this approach that I have outlined is acceptable to you all. Next, let me outline the indicative plan for the remaining agenda items. In our plenary on Monday, 29 April, we will consider agenda item 3D on dates and venues of subsequent sessions of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. Under this agenda item, the committee will take up the matter of the venue of the Diplomatic Conference of Plenipotentiaries. We will then consider agenda item 3E on the provisional agenda of the 5th session. In the plenary, we will also consider agenda item 5 on other matters, agenda item 6 on the adoption of the report of the session, and finally, agenda item 7 on the closing of the session. I will take it that we can proceed with our work on this basis, including on the approach just outlined. Thank you very much. If no objections, Iraq, please, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to express our trust to your leadership and to thank the hosting countries, Canada, for the warm hospitality, and to thank Secretariat for preparing that important meeting. I would like just to propose and ask from the contact group, if that possible, for a pre-scheduled time for each sub-contact group to be understood by our delegation to follow up the discussion through the different subgroup. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your statement. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we requesting the mandate for contact group? Because in this case, we would request the first reading in the contact group. On behalf of
Thank you very much for the question, Kuwait. We will take under agenda item 4.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I see no objections, so the organization of work is agreed. The committee has thus concluded its consideration of agenda item 3C. Agenda item 4, distinguished delegates. The committee will now consider agenda item 4 on the preparation of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including the marine environment. Under this item, the committee has before it document UNEP/PP/INC.4/3 entitled Revised Draft Text on the International Legally Binding Instrument on Plastic Pollution, including in the marine environment. In addition to the revised draft text, the committee also has before it 2 information documents which have been uploaded for our 4th session. These are document UNEP/PP/INC.4/INF/1 entitled Plastic Pollution Science, and document UNEP/PP/INC.4/INF/2 entitled Overview of Existing Funding Currently Available for Addressing Plastic Pollution through International Funding Arrangements. You will recall that the committee agreed at the 3rd session that the revised draft text will be the starting point and basis for textual negotiations and its 4th session, without prejudice to the right of any member to propose additions, deletions, or modifications in the course of negotiations at the 4th session. I will now kindly ask the Secretariat to introduce the document. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat will provide some further information on the document UNEP/PP/INC.4/3, the revised draft text, to highlight how it has been developed and structured. At its 3rd session, the committee requested the Secretariat to compile into a single revised draft text the merged text put forward during the session by contact groups 1 and 2, and the outcome document of contact group 3. When compiling the revised draft text from the 3rd session, the Secretariat was requested to standardize the formatting of the document and to correct any clear typing errors in the document without making any substantive changes to its document. As requested by the committee, the revised draft text has been structured following the outline of the zero draft document from INC-4. Only minimal presentational adjustments have been made to the text with a view to standardizing the format of the document for consistency of presentation and ease of reading, without modifying the substance of the text as presented in the respective outcome documents of the contact groups. Limited additions have been made to reflect inputs that had been omitted from the relevant outcome documents. These are marked accordingly in the document. The options outlined in the document are not presented in any order of priority. The revised draft text contained in the annex of the document is prefaced by a note by the Secretariat which recalls the mandate provided by the committee, the information presented here, as well as more detailed information related to the formatting conventions that have been applied for the purpose of the standardized formatting of the document. The revised draft text is structured into the following parts. Part 1, introductory elements. Part 2, substantive elements. Part 3, means of implementation. Part 4, implementation measures. Part 5, institutional arrangements, and Part 6, final provisions. Again, this is consistent with the structure of the zero draft text at INC-4. The document also includes draft annexes, a list of draft annexes relating to some of the options identified in the revised draft text. The list of possible annexes is included for ease of reference only. These annexes are included without prejudice to any decision that the committee may take with respect to their inclusion in a future instrument. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. I will now like to invite the committee to provide general remarks on the revised draft text as well as on the approach that I outlined earlier and in my guidance note with respect to the work on the contact groups. Since our time is limited, please keep your statements short and focused. More specific or technical statements will be most useful and informative in the contact groups. I'm aware that there are a lot of different issues to be discussed, so I intend to ensure that all delegations that wish to do so have had the possibility to express their views in plenary. That being said, I strongly encourage statements to be made on behalf of group of members and on behalf of alliances, coalitions, and groups of observers. Delegations are also reminded that you might submit longer statements via the documents platform, which will then be published on the website. This will allow you to emphasize key points during your plenary interventions and include further details in the submitted version. Later today, when we take statements from observers, please note we have put in place a dedicated quoting system for observers. And every observer seated with a microphone, you will find a QR code with instructions. Please follow these instructions if you wish to request the floor, and feel free to approach any of the Secretariat staff in the room if you require assistance. I now open the floor for statements on behalf of regional groups or groups of states. I would like to remind delegates that the time limit for group statements is 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I can see State of Palestine on behalf of the Group of Asia-Pacific States. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, heads of delegation and members, on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group, we extend our warm greetings and express our gratitude to Canada for their hospitality and to the Chair and the Secretariat for their diligent efforts in advancing our collective goal. Through the delivery of APG's high-level statement on plastic pollution at the 6th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, the group showed its political commitment to the process. We gather here at the 4th session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on plastic pollution with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment to address the pressing challenge of ending plastic pollution. We welcome the revised draft text presented in UNEP/PP/INC-4/3 as a foundational basis for our textual negotiations at this session. It represents a significant step forward, and here at INC-4, we look forward to its further streamlining and elaboration while maintaining key insights, aiming for its finalization by INC-5 in Busan, Korea, later this year. Our discussion should prioritize on the core substances specifically indicated in the UNEA Resolution 5/14. Furthermore, the APG calls for a decision on intersessional work for the period between INC-4 and INC-5, while respecting the negotiation process during the INCs. This work should allow for an in-depth dialogue aimed towards a better understanding of the issues vital for the finalization of the instrument at INC-5, ensuring that we maintain momentum and focus on our objectives. We stress the paramount importance of inclusiveness and consensus in our decision-making process. The diversity of our perspectives is a strength that, when harnessed through collaborative dialogue, can lead to robust and universally supported outcomes. Recognizing varying national circumstances, capacities, and approaches to address plastic pollution is crucial across the instrument. The APG believes that accommodating for flexibilities and various approaches will enable us to collectively embark on the most effective and suitable actions, which can be strengthened over time while allowing sufficient transition time for countries and markets to adjust in a step-by-step manner. We must avoid duplication and seek complementarity among relevant international conventions and instruments by identifying related activities and gaps with a view to closing those gaps. This will streamline our efforts and leverage existing mechanisms to combat plastic pollution effectively. Comprehensive approaches across the full life cycle of plastics for addressing legacy, present, and future plastic pollution need to be undertaken. Enhancing circularity approaches should stand as a core and overarching approach of this instrument, underpinned by, among others, improved product design and performance, as well as environmentally sound waste management. Our discussions on core obligations must proceed in tandem with those on the means of implementation while respecting national circumstances. The provision of timely, appropriate, and adequate financial and technical assistance, alongside modalities for technology transfer on mutually agreed terms, will be critical for the implementation of the instrument through effective and cost-efficient actions. We acknowledge that some obligations arising out of a new international legal binding instrument will require capacity building and technical and financial assistance in order to be effectively implemented by developing countries. National plans will have critical impact on progress of implementation of the instrument, urging country-driven actions across the full life cycle of plastics in a coherent and transparent manner. In closing, the Asia-Pacific Group reaffirms its willingness and commitment to constructively engage with all delegations. Together, let's forge a path towards a successful outcome, setting the stage for the ambition to complete the work by INC-5. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of the State of Palestine on behalf of the group of Asia-Pacific states, and now I would like to give the floor to Uruguay on behalf of GRULAC. Please, Uruguay, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I will deliver the statement in Spanish. Voy a pronunciar la...
Chair, I'm honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of Latin American and Caribbean States, GRULAC. We would like to thank the Government of Canada for hosting this important meeting and congratulate Ambassador Luis Vallas Valdivieso for assuming the chairpersonship of the INC, and to commend him and his team for their diligent work during the intersessional period. We also thank the INC Secretariat for organising the present session and for the preparation of the revised draft text, which directly responds to the mandate of INC-3, reflecting the views and positions expressed by the committee. We recognise the Chair and his team's dedication to guiding this process transparently and inclusively, taking into consideration the 3 informal meetings held with the INC heads of delegations prior to INC-4, as well as the open dialogue which they have fostered with all stakeholders. In line with the INC-3 mandate, GRULAC's expectations is to use this revised draft text as the basis for our negotiations, with a view to narrowing the options contained in the text over the next few days. GRULAC strongly advocates for discussions on both provisions and structure, in order to identify and build on areas of convergence and bridge gaps in positions as we forge towards a more streamlined text, with the ambition of reaching an agreement at the upcoming INC-5. Therefore, it's essential that, as soon as possible, 2 contact groups and their respective subgroups are established, as set out in the Chair's scenario note. This given the limited time available to complete our work. While most of GRULAC members have small delegations, we do acknowledge the need to make swift progress at this stage, as we have an extremely complex text before us and few hours of negotiation available. In this regard, we are willing to demonstrate flexibility in support of the Chair's proposal of having up to 3 groups meeting simultaneously on an exceptional basis, with the assurances that the organisation of work will be transparent and communicated in a timely manner. In terms of the proposed legal drafting group to be established by the committee at INC-4, GRULAC supports this initiative to ensure that as we make substantive progress, the text is reflected in a legally sound manner as soon as possible. Chair, as GRULAC, we would like to reiterate our commitment to developing an ambitious and effective international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. This needs to take into consideration the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda and the protection and promotion of human rights, including the right to health and to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. The instrument should be based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastics and should include obligations, control measures and voluntary measures, taking into account national circumstances and capabilities of developing countries. It should be supported by sufficient and robust means of implementation. We are convinced that this will contribute to addressing the interlinked environmental crises such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, which disproportionately affects developing countries. The instrument must be guided by the key principles of international environmental law, including the principles of the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, just transition, including an inclusive transition for waste pickers, by the promotion and protection of human rights as a cross-cutting guiding principle, a gender perspective, intergenerational equity, non-discrimination, access to information, transparency and accountability, coherence among existing multilateral environmental agreements, and the use of the best available science, traditional knowledge, knowledge of indigenous peoples, and local knowledge systems. The objective and the scope must be guided by the mandate set out by UNEP Resolution 514 and not be repetitive. Regarding definitions, we support the inclusion of terms that are strictly necessary to provide clarity on the obligations and to facilitate the implementation of the instrument. In addition, the future instrument should promote decent work throughout the entire value chain of plastics, especially to protect workers from occupational health hazards within the plastics sector, including waste pickers and other workers in informal and cooperative settings. We should ensure that the transition is just and inclusive for waste pickers, as well as empower them as active stakeholders of sustainable development. The instrument should also acknowledge the contributions and special challenges of indigenous peoples, local communities, and other groups in situations of vulnerability. GRULAC stresses the need of advancing the discussions on the provisions related to polymers and chemicals of concern, as well as problematic and avoidable plastic products. Also, on the identification of global criteria for the elaboration of initial lists to be considered by the committee. We need inclusive, formal intersessional work in order to have more clarity and to build bridges on those technical issues, as well as on means of implementation, which are essential to achieve an ambitious instrument. Our work must continue to be informed by the best available science, which will also be essential once the instrument enters into force. In this regard, the establishment of a scientific and technical subsidiary body of a multidisciplinary composition with equitable geographical representation and gender balance will be critical. Developing countries have multidimensional needs, and we would like to highlight that all GRULAC countries are developing countries, with consideration for the unique vulnerabilities and circumstances of small island developing states. We wish to reiterate the need for a strong and dedicated financial mechanism, which may include, but not be limited to, the creation of a new fund, new and additional financial resources, capacity building, technical assistance programs, technology transfer, that constitute robust means of implementation to effectively support us in implementing the future instruments. Moreover, we recognize the value of the Basel and Stockholm Conventions regional and sub-regional centres, as well as Regional Seas Conventions and action plans and their respective protocols and centres, which are conducting work and implementing plans on plastics. In that regard, we call for the use of existing regional and sub-regional centres as appropriate to aid effectiveness of the future instrument, while strengthening the regional delivery of technical assistance and also fostering coordination, cooperation and collaboration among other multilateral environmental agreements. In the interest of moving swiftly towards substantive negotiations and following the advice of our esteemed chair, our delegations will keep their national statements brief or will submit them in writing. Finally, GRULAC will continue to work constructively with all stakeholders to make substantive progress in the development of an international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, to safeguard our environment and protect our health for present and future generations. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Uruguay, representing GRULAC.
I would like to give the floor to Ghana on behalf of the group of African states. Please, Ghana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to deliver the statement on behalf of the African Group member states. The African Group wishes to extend its sincere gratitude to the Government of Canada for hosting the 4th session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, INC-4, meeting this beautiful city of Ottawa. We welcome the incoming INC Chair, Mr. Luis Valdivieso, and wish you a successful chairing in guiding us towards the new instrument. We commend the INC Chair, the Bureau, and the INC Secretariat for the successful organization of the meeting so far. We have confidence in your leadership and look forward to continued collaboration, and would like to express our full support to the INC Chair and the Secretariat. We thank you, Chair, for the revised zero draft text of the instrument, which is paving the way towards the finalization of the instrument before the end of this year. The African Group reaffirms its commitment to Sustainable Development Goal 12 and commits to supporting measures to achieve sustainable consumption and production of primary plastic polymers and eliminating specific problematic polymers, chemicals, products, and applications of concern. We also emphasize the application of the relevant real principles within the provision of the instrument, mainly the common but differentiated responsibilities. As a region, we embrace product design, enabling a full life cycle approach to prevent plastic pollution, and call for measures that ensures transparency and information disclosure along the entire plastic value chain. On the principle of just transition, Africa acknowledges that implementing the future instrument may lead to job and livelihood losses, as well as other socio-economic impacts along the plastic value chain. Therefore, we call for an instrument that takes into account the national circumstances and priorities to ensure a fair, equitable, and inclusive transition for affected populations, with special considerations for communities in vulnerable situations, such as waste pickers. On waste management and legacy plastic pollution, the African Group calls for an instrument that operationalizes the waste hierarchy by prioritizing waste prevention and reduction before non-toxic recycling and disposals. We further call for effective measures that ensure environmentally sound waste management practices along the entire value chain and the life cycle of plastics. Over the years, the African region has become the target of choice for illegal traders of plastic waste as a global hiding place. For an effective instrument, it is highly imperative that we gather efforts to tackle illegal traffic and dumping of plastic waste. On the financing mechanism, Chair, the African Group stresses the need for a new dedicated multilateral fund to provide the necessary, predictable, sustainable, adequate, and readily accessible financial resources to enable developing countries meet their commitments and obligations under the instrument. In line with the UN's integrated financial mechanism, we call on the private sector to demonstrate responsibility, transparency, participation, and engagement through contribution to address plastic pollution. Regarding capacity building, development, and infrastructure, the African Group wishes to emphasize the need for technology transfer, technical assistance, capacity building for the effective implementation of the future instrument. On research, innovation, awareness, and education, the Africa Group calls for an instrument that promotes information and knowledge exchange, international cooperation, and coordination based on best available science. For private sector and stakeholders' engagement, we encourage parties to promote actions that will stimulate public-private partnership and prevent sector investment in circular economy along the plastics value chain. The African Group reiterates our support for hosting of the Secretariat of the Future Instrument at the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Programme. Mr. Chair, The African group welcomes the establishment of the legal drafting group and other subgroups put forth to expedite the negotiations of the instruments. The African group volunteers to chair the legal group. Finally, Mr. Chair, considering that we are already past halfway through the time frame allocated for this negotiation process, we look forward to progressing with the negotiations to further refine the options in the revised zero draft and to identify areas of common understanding. We anticipate that a formal mandate for identify areas of common, we anticipate that a formal mandate for a participatory and inclusive intersessional work will be established in this INC section. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of Ghana on behalf of the African group. And now I would like to give the floor to Samoa on behalf of the Small Islands Developing States. Please, Samoa, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Samoa is honored to deliver these remarks on behalf of the 39 small island developing states. Firstly, we would like to acknowledge that we are all gathered on the unceded traditional history of the Algonquin people and extend our sincerest gratitude to them, to the government and all the people of Canada for their warm hospitality and generosity. We also take this opportunity to thank the Chair, his team, and the INC Secretariat for their diligent efforts in making all preparations and arrangements to help facilitate our participation here this week in the capital city of Ottawa. Further, we welcome the revised draft text of the international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment as a basis for negotiations, and convey our thanks to the Chair for convening 3 informal heads of delegation consultations in preparation for INC-4. These discussions served as useful exchanges of member states' views on key issues in this process. We reiterate our commitment in this process and our goal to complete the work of INC by the end of 2024, recognizing the pivotal role this agreement will play in the global concerted effort to address yet another environmental crisis that SIDS are disproportionately affected by but contribute minimally to. It is well established that SIDS have special circumstances given our geographic challenges, limited resources, and vulnerabilities to external economic shocks. As SIDS, we are on the front lines of the triple planetary crisis of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, and the risks to our livelihoods, economies, health, and environment. Throughout the negotiations and in line with Resolution 514, SIDS have repeatedly called for an ambitious, effective, and equitable international legally binding instrument that addresses a full life cycle approach to end plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Moreover, the agreement must be supported by new, additional, adequate, and predictable means of implementation. This must include a robust financial mechanism which advances just transition and provides specific support provisions for SIDS, including priority access to fast-track resources, technology transfer, technical assistance, and capacity building. An effective instrument for SIDS means that there must be comprehensive regulation of hazardous, problematic, and avoidable chemicals and polymers used in plastic production and plastic products, including single-use plastics and microplastics, where strength of the obligations should depend on the level of harm. We must also consider the possibility of cooperating and/or coordinating with existing relevant frameworks or conventions as appropriate. Global harmonized standards in key areas will be essential to ensure high ambition as well as an inclusive and transformative actions by all. Moreover, we remind states that Resolution 514 also prescribes for the reduction of existing plastic pollution. For SIDS, the instrument must include a mechanism for the remediation of existing plastic pollution in the marine environment, including in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Mr. Chair, at this critical juncture in the negotiations, and with our final session fast approaching, formal intercessional work is not just a consideration for SIDS. It is an absolute necessity to advance this process. AOSIS has developed and shared an intercessional work proposal to support further discussions on key areas. We look forward to engaging with members on this proposal in the coming days. As we approach the convening of contact groups and subgroups, we call for clear and transparent instructions and mandates to co-chairs and co-facilitators, with consideration for small delegations such as ours in the organization of our discussions. We urge colleagues to utilize our time efficiently here in Ottawa to reach convergence on key elements that would drive meaningful progress toward Busan. Finally, SIDS remains committed to maintaining constructive and productive discussions on a future agreement that is inclusive, ambitious, equitable, and innovative. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Samoa, on behalf of the SIDS. Now I would like to give the floor to the European Union. Please, European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, colleagues. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its 27 member states. Georgia, North Macedonia, the Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine align themselves with this statement. It cannot be stressed enough, plastic pollution is one of the most pressing environmental issues we face today. We're therefore very pleased to be here today in the lovely city of Ottawa and wish to thank Canada for hosting INC-4. We also thank Canada for bringing ministers together and for organizing, together with WWF, the Partnership Day ahead of the official meeting. Let me say that we think that for the final stages of the negotiations, we will, however, need additional political momentum, and we therefore would support reinforced and inclusive ministerial involvement in the process. We'd also like to thank you, Chair, and the Secretariat for all the work undertaken in preparation for this meeting, and that the documents and the arrangements that have been put together are a good basis for our work. We're here to speed up our common work towards a treaty which will address the whole life cycle of plastics in order to stop the negative impact that plastic pollution has on our planet, our environment, and our health. A paradigm shift, especially in the upstream parts of the value chain, is essential to ensure sustainable production and use of plastics. Mr. Chairman, the European Union and its member states would like to thank you for the revised draft, for the scenario note, and for the extensive outreach that you have carried out over those last months and weeks. This, in our view, has helped our preparation and will allow us to hit the ground running at this fourth session of the INC. At this INC, our discussions will have to shift to a higher gear. The time for real textual negotiations has arrived, and we are prepared for this step in the process. We're looking forward to further share our views, to listen carefully to proposals from others, and to work together to find common and ambitious ground in working towards our common goal of ending plastic pollution. The European Union and its member states support the method and modalities of work that you have set out in your scenario note and in your explanations today. We are ready to discuss possibilities for streamlining of the draft text in the contact groups and moving on to working on text in subgroups as soon as possible. The EU and its member states expect this session of the INC to address all parts of the draft treaty text with proportional time allocated to each part. We expect this INC to produce a consolidated text that puts us into a position to finalize the treaty negotiations by the end of this year as foreseen in Resolution 5/14. Furthermore, as others, we expect INC-4 to agree on targeted, inclusive and formal intercessional work, and we also support the setting up of a legal drafting group with a clear mandate. The EU and its member states are looking forward to starting this work with you, Mr. Chairman, with your co-chairs, with co-facilitators and with all delegates and observers. We'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, for your dedication and hard work, and wish us all a fruitful, constructive, and ambitious work and discussion in the coming days. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the European Union, and now I give the floor to the representative of Vanuatu on behalf of the Pacific seats. Please, Vanuatu, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Vanuatu has the honor to speak on behalf of the 14 Pacific small island developing states. We align with the statement delivered by Samoa on behalf of AOCs and State of Palestine on behalf of the Asia-Pacific Group. Firstly, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on traditional unceded territory of the First Nations. We thank the people and government of Canada for their warm hospitality and commend the continued outstanding support provided by the INC Secretariat. Mr. Chair, we acknowledge the preparation of the revised zero draft, which reflects the many inputs from the delegations and is a good basis for negotiations. Our Pacific delegates have traveled far to add our voices to this important conversation and work with all delegations to craft an effective and ambitious instrument to end plastic pollution to prevent further harm to our beautiful islands. The interconnected impacts of plastic pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss magnify the strain on our already struggling economies, and science confirms that we must act urgently to address the issue. Effective cooperation, legally binding measures, and support through a comprehensive finance package with adequate means of implementation will be vital for an ambitious instrument. Mr. Chair, we know that plastics contain harmful chemicals, many of which are unregulated, and we know that downstream measures alone cannot solve the plastic pollution crisis. So in this instrument, we must ensure overall reduction of plastic, including primary plastic polymers, elimination of harmful chemicals, additives, and strong transparency and disclosure measures. To truly understand the impacts of plastic pollution, we should rely on a range of sources of information, including traditional knowledge and the best available science. Across the instrument, the impacts on human health, terrestrial and marine environments should inform the actions taken under the instrument. Mr. Chair, our special circumstances as small island states may set us apart, but they do not diminish potential to partner as equals in pursuing mutually beneficial outcomes for our countries, people, and the future we want. As we continue to mitigate and adapt to international environmental and climate crisis, preventative and responsive legal measures are of fundamental importance. PCITS supports the proposed method of work and would encourage immediately turning to contact groups and subgroups so that we can engage with other delegations and start streamlining the text. We support your proposal on limiting parallel meetings, which allows our smaller delegations to cover negotiations effectively. Having said that, time is of the essence, and there are some matters which require dedicated space for discussion. So we would like to see the formalization of an intersessional work program as soon as possible to meet the mandate and finalize this text by INC-4. The PCITS are committed to resolving issues by consensus to the greatest degree possible. However, we consider it is important that the INC be able to take decisive action as needed. We look forward to a constructive week ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of Vanuatu on behalf of the Pacific Small Island Developing States. And now I give the floor to Indonesia on behalf of the coordinating body of the Seas of East Asia. Please, Indonesia, you have the floor.
We thank the Government of Canada for hosting INC-4 and appreciate the dedication of the INC Chair, Secretariat, and all member states in advancing the global treaty for the long-term elimination of plastic pollution in marine and other environments. Coordinating body on the Seas of East Asia, COP-C, is fully committed to constructive engagement in negotiating an ambitious, fair, effective, and balanced future instrument on plastic pollution globally, including in the marine environment. Addressing transboundary pollution caused by plastic waste and microplastic is paramount within the future instrument. We advocate for pollution mitigation and advancing circularity of plastic, considering the well-recognized principles, among others, of sustainable development, common but differentiated responsibility, international cooperation, and tailored to national circumstances and capabilities. The future instrument must be country-driven, creating an enabling environment, setting tailored sustainability targets and action, while respecting national sovereignty and regional priorities. We are committed to a meaningful outcome by INC-5 in Busan, Republic of Korea, through an inclusive process. The instrument should be comprehensive, pragmatic, well-balanced, inclusive, and transparent based on available scientific evidence. It should empower countries to take science-based actions against plastic pollution, leveraging available scientific knowledge, promoting research and development. It is also important that the instrument allows for reasonable transition timelines for industries and market to adjust. We call for scientific and socio-economic assessment on plastic pollution that incorporate diverse knowledge systems, including the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities, and facilitating the exchange of science, technology, and policy-relevant information among countries. We urge support for countries to implement the future instrument effectively and strengthen national action plans, which serve as the backbone to address plastic pollution. Also, we emphasize the need for real funding to drive meaningful progress. Engaging all stakeholders across sectors, including governments, business, public and private finance institutions, investors, civil society, waste pickers, indigenous people, and local communities and scientific bodies is essential for collaboration and knowledge sharing. We reiterate the importance of complementary actions and a coherent, coordinated long-term global vision enshrined in the future instrument, building on existing regional mechanisms such as regional seas programs. Guided by the COP-C Strategic Direction 2023 to 2027 and Regional Action Plan on Marine Litter, we will continue to strengthen capacity building and regional knowledge sharing efforts. We look forward to timely and sustainable arrangement for capacity building, financial and technical assistance, and international cooperation, particularly for nations with limited resources to effectively implement future treaty. Thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Indonesia on behalf of the coordination body of the Seas of the East Asia. And now I give the floor to Malawi on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition. Malawi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi has the honor to deliver remarks on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition to End Plastic, which is made up of 65 countries. We recall the agreement of Union Resolution 514 and underline that achieving the goal of ending plastic pollution requires an ambitious and effective international legally binding instrument that is comprehensive in scope, addresses the full life cycle of plastic, including primary plastic polymers, products that are made of or containing plastics, as well as associated chemicals and plastic pollution in all its dimensions. We underline the scientific evidence of negative impacts on the environment and on human health related to pollution, plastic pollution. The need for a precautionary approach, the UN General Assembly Resolution 76/300 on the human rights to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and the need to protect human rights of persons in vulnerable situations across the plastic life cycle, including children, women, indigenous people, local communities, coastal communities, waste pickers, and other workers in informal or cooperative setting. We recognize the important role the science, knowledge, and traditional practices the indigenous people and of local communities play in contributing to the sustainable management and protection of the environment from plastic pollution. We stress that ending plastic pollution will require common legal binding global rules and control measures based on best available science to restrain and reduce consumption and production of primary plastic polymers to sustainable levels, to eliminate and restrict unnecessary, avoidable, and problematic plastic products, as well as plastic polymers and chemicals of environmental and health concern, to establish global criteria or requirements for products, including on durability, reuse, repair, and recycling, to ensure a safe, circular economy for plastics that protects the environment and human health, to achieve the environmentally sound management of plastic waste, eliminate the release of plastics, including microplastics, to air, water, and land, and remediate, and where possible or feasible, eliminate plastic pollution using the best available techniques and environmental practices to avoid exacerbating environmental harm. We highlight the need for reliable information throughout the plastic value chain and binding measures and provision on transparency, labeling, monitoring, and reporting across the full life cycle of plastic, including on the type and quantities of polymers, the composition of plastic materials and products, including chemicals, as well as labeling across plastic value chain, to provide necessary product information to ensure accountability and inform action while protecting confidential business information not related to the health and safety of human and the environment. Alongside these minimum requirements, we highlight the need to mobilize the necessary resources from all sources, public and private, domestic and international, stand ready to discuss the most appropriate mechanism for ensuring timely, accessible, recurrent, predictable, and adequate financing for implementation, and call for ambitious and effective means of implementation, including financing to support implementation in recipient countries, in particular least developed countries and small island developing states, recognizing in principle that all countries should provide domestic resources for their national activities. We stress, Chair, the need to align financial flows and policies to deliver actions on the ground and to end harmful incentives such as subsidies that work against the goal to end plastic pollution. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative of Malawi on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition. Now I give the floor to Kuwait on behalf of the like-minded delegations. Please, Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Esteemed Chair, distinguished delegates, on behalf of the like-minded countries, allow me to express our heartfelt gratitude and extend warm congratulations to you. Our sincere appreciation goes to the Government of Canada and INC Secretariat for their gracious hospitality in hosting this pivotal gathering. Their warm welcome sets the stage for what we anticipate will be a constructive and impactful dialogue. Mr. Chair, guided by the mandate set forth in UNEP 5/14, our objective is crystal clear: to refine our focus and refine the draft text into a document that is not only clear and concise, but also actionable. This will empower us to navigate these negotiations with efficiency and efficacy. However, efficiency alone cannot suffice. We must anchor our deliberations in the bedrock of core principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and sustainable development. It's imperative that any policy framework acknowledges national circumstances and disparate capacities and circumstances of developing countries, particularly ensuring that they are not unduly burdened. While for developed nations, acknowledging that the largest share of historical plastic pollution originated in developed countries and of the technologies and resources they command. This necessitates a robust commitment to take a lead to address plastic pollution and supporting means of implementation, including financial and technological assistance, including technology transfer in mutually agreed terms for developing countries. Such support is indispensable for facilitating the transition to sustainable practices and equitable waste management solutions. Mr. Chair, let us engage in discussion guided by these principles, focusing on our areas of shared concern while remaining open to constructive dialogue. Inclusivity and consensus building are paramount, drawing strength from the diverse perspective represented in this forum. Moreover, as we chart a course towards a new treaty, let us heed the imperative of complementarity, avoiding duplication, and leveraging existing international frameworks by aligning our efforts with relevant conventions and instruments. We can amplify our impact and deliver tangible outcomes. As we convene at this critical juncture, the urgency of our task is clear. While time presses upon us, we must resist the temptation of hastening towards an agreement devoid of substance and equity. A hurried accord risks diluting our collective efforts against plastic pollution. Let us instead prioritize quality over expediency. The eyes of the world are upon us, demanding tangible progress. Let us depart from INC-4 with a clear path forward, laying the groundwork for a successful INC-5 and ultimately an instrument that is attainable, realistic, and in line with our shared goals of sustainable development. In closing, we reaffirm our unwavering commitment to this process. We stand in solidarity with our esteemed chair and the Secretariat, guided by a shared vision to address plastic pollution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of Kuwait on behalf of the like-minded delegations. And now I give the floor to Qatar on behalf of the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Please, Qatar, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will speak in Arabic. شكرا السيد الرئيس أصحاب.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Chair, on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council, I would like to begin by congratulating you for your election. I would like to thank Canada for the sound organization of this INC-4 meeting so that we can establish an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. Please allow me also to thank the Secretariat, who has guided our negotiations at every stage. It's important to not hold more than one parallel meeting to ensure that all topics are treated equally. Chair, the delegations of the Gulf Cooperation Council reiterate their commitment to making this meeting a success. and our commitment to ensuring that we implement Resolution 514 of UNEP. We would also like to say that the time allocated to us should not have an impact on our outcomes. We want to act in solidarity with the Asia-Pacific group and in solidarity with delegations from other countries. We need to build consensus and do this through mutual understanding of diverging opinions in order to establish a single platform. We need to be flexible so that we can listen to one another and the majority. This instrument needs to recognize the economic realities of all countries, to work towards more sustainable practices, both from an economic and environmental standpoint, in order to respect the capacities of developing countries in particular. Chair, when we look at the document which has been prepared, including what has been done by the Secretariat, we can see that there are lots of attempts at simplification and clarification for this process. By very clearly setting out definitions and the technical glossary, the various priorities which have been established for the principles which are really the cornerstone of this project. For the international period, we want to give priority to alternative economy, to waste management systems, taking into account the schedule of international meetings and regional meetings throughout the year, as well as, for example, conferences on biodiversity and climate change. We need to remain aware of the global and universal nature of this issue. And we have to attach utmost importance and means to scientific research and innovation. We need to avoid adding an extra load, including a financial burden, on developing countries. We need just solutions in order to implement and achieve a green and balanced process. We take into account recycling, the sound management of waste, in particular in developing countries. We need to share experiences and expertise, in particular coming from countries with specific expertise in banning plastics. With the utmost respect and commitment, the Gulf states believe that the efforts being conducted by all member states needs to achieve convergence around a legally binding instrument. We are ready to work with all delegations to achieve this outcome. Let us bear in mind that we should not deviate, though, from what's set out in the UNEP resolution. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Qatar on behalf of the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council, and I thank you very much for your statements. And I can see on my list some member states wanted to take the floor on national capacity, and since our time is limited, I will ask the member states and encourage kindly to keep your statements short and focused. I can see Iran. Please, Iran, followed by Brazil. Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, good morning. At the outset, I wish to express the delight of my delegation to be here in Ottawa for another fruitful negotiation with an ambition to develop an international legal instrument which could efficiently address the issue of plastic pollution, particularly in the marine environment. In this respect, we wish to echo our appreciation to the INC Secretariat and the host country for their efforts in organizing this important meeting. We also would like to express our sincere gratitude and felicitation over the leadership of Your Excellency Ambassador Vallas, and we remain assured that through your able chairmanship, balanced approach, and working closely with all countries and groups of countries, we would be able to conclude our work in constructive, positive, and timely manner. My delegation also wishes to associate itself with the statement of Kuwait on behalf of the group of like-minded countries, as well as the statement of the State of Palestine on behalf of the Asia-Pacific group in this respect. Dear friends, we are living in a critical juncture that the world is facing with various geopolitical, economic, and environmental challenges, including various pollution, resulting mostly from inefficiency and mismanagement. But in addressing the issue of plastic pollution, we do need to acknowledge that plastic products represent a cornerstone of our modern life. Plastic is an indispensable material for the society, economy, and trade, and it provides tremendous services and support to the healthcare system, agriculture, and food security, and important industries. However, the continuing mismanagement of legacy as well as newly generated plastic waste has led and is still contributing to environmental pollution. Addressing these challenges, in addition to the political will, necessitates maturity in understanding the nature and the scope of these issues, together with focusing on the potential for reducing and elimination of those pollution through a better plastic waste management and mobilizing financial resources and technical and technological assistance, in particular to developing countries for their calculated and environmentally sound actions. To better understand about the huge potential and effectiveness of plastic waste management related actions for drastically reducing pollution, it is good to know that only 9% of total plastic waste in the world are recycled, while 50% goes to landfills and 30% are burned, with unbelievable impacts on environment and human health. This is why we believe that improved patterns and ways of waste management, together with change in plastic products, designs, and applications in order to make our life more sustainable, shall be the core of the future installment. In this relation, it must be ensured that the objectives, scope, and the coverage of the initial mandate given by the Union Resolution 5/14 is not overstretched and overridden, and the future instrument shall not apply to materials and intermediate products which are of dual-use nature and have to be further processed for serving many end uses other than plastics. On the other side, we should bear in mind that actions could not be taken and enforced in vacuum, and necessarily we should take into account the realities of our life, including their circumstances, capabilities, capacities, and development priorities of countries, in particular the need for economic growth, food security, and poverty eradication as the most overriding priorities for developing nations in this respect. Accordingly, in consideration of possible solutions and response measures to the challenges of plastic pollution, we should be cautious and realistic, not to be deceived or misguided by misperceptions, and to ensure that our objective would be attainable and our action effective. Certainly, a cooperative, voluntary, and bottom-up approach shall better serve such goal. It is also essential to ensure that parties are not compelled to make a choice between their pursuit of national sustainable development and the foisted instrument of tackling plastic pollution. Furthermore, in such a strive, and taking into account the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, developed countries should take the lead in a legally binding manner, and the developing countries would also follow, but on a voluntary basis and through unhindered access to the means of implementation. In this respect, it shall be ensured that the measures taken to combat plastic pollution, including the unilateral ones, should not constitute a means of arbitrary or unjustifiable discrimination or a disguised restriction on international trade, in particular against the strive of the developing countries. On the other hand, there is a dire need to ensure non-discrimination treatment of plastic products waste product from other materials in terms of their impact on human health, environment, and climate, in particular water scarcity, food security, and other socioeconomic factors. On organization of work and procedural matters, we believe that any decision within the framework of the future instrument shall be made by consensus. Further, under Agenda Item 4, we must undertake the first reading of the elements and options of the zero draft. On the legal drafting group, we will come to discuss the terms of reference, composition, and modalities of its works toward the end of INC-4, but due to unclarity on all of the issues at this stage, this group should not start its work earlier than INC-5, depending on the level of progress to achieve here in Ottawa. Further, this group should avoid entering into any discussion or decision-making on sustainable matters. On the issue of diplomatic conference, we support to discuss on the venue of that event, but certainly consideration of any specific date in this respect is premature at this stage and should be left for INC-5. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Iran, and now I give the floor to Brazil, followed by Ukraine. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Brazilian delegation wishes you all success as chair of INC and thanks Canada for welcoming us all in such a beautiful venue. Dear colleagues, Brazil supports the statement by Uruguay on behalf of GRULAC. Brazil is very committed to an international legally binding treaty to end plastic pollution that has everybody, every country, and every sector of society on board. Committed also to building the best possible agreement on the best available science, Brazil co-organized with the UK informal expert consultations on polymers and chemicals of concern and problematic and avoidable plastic products. Science tells us we need to focus on plastics not only as waste, but as products per se. We need more transparency regarding their composition, ban or restrict certain types of problematic applications of those polymers and chemicals, and stop producing products that harm human health and the environment. We shall leave behind at once the old linear way of production, producing, using, and disposing, and move towards a circular way by designing, producing, using, and reusing, recycling, remanufacturing. We need to identify the measures, lists, and annexes to be adopted globally until INC-5, so we all have clarity on the measures we will implement together. Like other developing countries who preceded us today, we support international work on means of implementation that does not avoid the issue of a financial mechanism for this treaty. The agreement will never work in the real world if we don't estimate the costs and provide developing countries with the necessary financial resources, technologies, and capacities. We need to prioritize science and innovation in developing countries, as new solutions and technologies are quite often far from developing countries, in particular SIDS and LDCs. Finally, on the social aspects of our endeavor, let's protect and empower all workers in the plastic value chain, in particular informal workers such as waste pickers. Mr. Chair, you have our full support. Secretariat, thank you so much for the revised draft text. Let's have a successful meeting. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Brazil. Now I give the floor to Ukraine, followed by the Philippines. Ukraine, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, I am honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the government of Ukraine. First of all, let me express my deepest gratitude to entire INC and UNEP teams for the excellent organization of the INC-4, as well as to the government and people of Canada for their hospitality. I am convinced that this session will bring us closer to our common ambitious goals to end plastic pollution and to preserve our nature for future generations. Despite all the challenges caused by the unprovoked and unjustified invasion, Ukraine is taking all the possible measures to implement necessary environmental reforms as well as to strengthen global environmental agenda. For many years, Ukraine has been actively developing and implementing the legislation aimed at elimination of the problem with plastics waste in our country. A number of important initiatives, such as on the limitation of volume of plastic bags or on prohibition of Certain plastic products have been successfully implemented in Ukraine. Unfortunately, we know that war and armed conflicts are negatively affecting the environment as well. Ukraine is taking all the necessary measures to protect our environment from the dangerous consequences of invasion. In particular, one of the important elements of the peace formula of President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is dedicated to environmental protection and restoration on effective ecosystems. The government of Ukraine is also committed to its international obligations and is keen of adoption international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. Thus, we welcome and fully support the excellent joint initiative of the governments of Rwanda and Norway to establish the High Ambition Coalition to end plastic pollution. I am honored to announce that recently Ukraine officially became a new member of the High Ambition Coalition. We are looking forward to working with all countries towards achieving our ambitious goals. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ukraine, and now I will give the floor to the Philippines, followed by Guatemala. Please, the Philippines, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, and distinguished delegates, the Philippines is honored to join you this week in Ottawa for INC-4. We extend our gratitude to the Government of Canada and the UNEP Secretariat for hosting this significant event. In the interest of time, we are highlighting the following observations, as a longer version of this statement will be uploaded. Plastic pollution should be addressed holistically, comprehensively, throughout its full life cycle. The production of plastics should be addressed if we are to be successful at addressing its release into the environment as waste. International cooperation on a just transition, while respecting human rights, should encompass workers in both the production and waste management of plastics. High ambition should be achieved not just in the scope, breadth, and depth of the core obligations, but just as importantly, in the provision and facilitation in the use of means and tools of implementation for developing countries. The circumstances of environmentally and ecologically vulnerable, geographically disadvantaged developing countries like the Philippines, an archipelagic state under the UNCLOS, should be recognized. All the Rio Declaration principles, including common but differentiated responsibilities, precaution, prevention of transboundary harm, and non-restriction of trade, and meaningful public participation are as relevant today as they were when we envisioned our common future. The private sector and civil society's action should be further strengthened by the democratization of the best available scientific knowledge, including socioeconomic assessments, through the establishment of a science policy body. This instrument should be ambitious, effective, equitable, inclusive, and science-based. Our response to this part of a complex set of mutually reinforcing planetary threats will dictate whether future generations will suffer an inhospitable warming world, drowning in rising seas, choked by plastic pollution. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of the Philippines, and now I give the floor to Guatemala. Guatemala, por favor, tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dear delegates representing your various countries, I'd like to express the most sincere thanks of Guatemala to the Secretariat of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for developing and distributing all of the relevant texts for this session. It takes into account the comments of members. I would also like to thank the Government of Canada and the United Nations Environment Programme for welcoming us to this fourth session in order to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment. In this regard, we would also like to thank the delegation of Uruguay, who spoke on behalf of GRULAC, and we align ourselves with their statement. In addition, Guatemala would like to propose that the goals of this session, in line with the mandate established in Resolution 514, enables us to work in an inclusive manner in order to identify points of convergence through which we can build on this ambitious and important instrument, respecting the national circumstances and capacities of each country, enabling us to achieve a just transition and to respect the sovereignty of each state. Guatemala would like to thank the Secretariat for their work in preparing the negotiating document. We need to also take into account indigenous peoples, academia, the public sector and private sector. And this will enable us to develop an inclusive approach. In our processes, we would like to highlight that Guatemala is a developing country. We need to ensure that we develop an instrument which provides financial support, both at international and national level, to countries such as ours. We also need technology transfer, capacity building, and development of internal and domestic law, taking into account the respective circumstances and capabilities of each country. We'd like to highlight the importance of creating effective mechanisms for implementation. It's essential that the instrument contains the definition of key terms and concepts in order to standardize and strengthen our knowledge for the implementation of measures in a cohesive and coherent manner for all stakeholders, as was signalled in the third session. The construction of the instrument needs to take into account human health and the conservation of the environment. It's a challenge to do so, in particular for developing countries, as their economies might be affected. With regards to our negotiations, I'd like to highlight the concern of more than 2 simultaneous parallel contact groups, since some delegations, such as ours, are very small. We'd like to therefore ask you to use this resource as only a last resort. I hope that we have a very successful meeting. Thank you very much, Chair. I thank the representative of Guatemala.
I give the floor to China. Please, Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China would like to thank hosting country Canada for the support given. I would like to thank the Chair and the Secretariat, UNEP, for their hard work. In order to achieve substantial progress, China is proposing the following. First, with regard to the core item, it is important that we have consensus on these core issues. China suggests that all parties adhere to multilateralism, show the greatest inclusiveness, and in the spirit of solidarity and cooperation, join hands to deal with plastic pollution, focus on plastic pollution in strict accordance with the mandate of UNEA, and conduct negotiations. 2, respecting national autonomous decisions. Through the previous 3 INC meetings, all parties have fully understood that countries are at different stages. In terms of plastic pollution, they have different situations, different countries. Therefore, we need to respect each country's decisions in accordance with their own situation. We need to have a broad consensus. 3, we need to promote process objectively and rationally. With regard to the part where there are serious differences. We need to be constructive in finding a transitional bridging solution which is acceptable to all and legally binding, so that we can start our actions. As countries take actions on plastic pollution, in terms of policy, technology, capacity, including the development and assessment of alternatives, countries can further formulate their own measures in accordance with their situation. China would like closely to work with all parties to bridge our gaps. Through sincere communication, we can contribute to our discussion. Thank you.
I thank the representative of China, and now I give the floor to Bangladesh. Please, Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, on behalf of Government of Bangladesh, I express my sincere thanks and appreciation to the INC Secretariat, the Government of Canada, and its citizens for hosting the meeting and warm hospitality. Mr. Chair, Bangladesh fully supports the statement of the Asia-Pacific Group. In addition, Bangladesh would like to raise the issue of plastic pollution in the downstream countries. Plastic pollution in marine and other environments can be a transboundary nature and needs to be tackled together with its impacts through a full life cycle approach, taking into the account of national circumstances and capabilities. Plastic can easily cross the administrative boundary without any intervention. Studies shows that rivers are the major source of transporting plastic load into the sea. Mr. Chair, downstream countries receive plastic from upstream, causing adverse impact to the human health and marine environment. These downstream countries are vulnerable and disburse extra national budget to manage cross-border plastic waste. Therefore, I emphasize the importance of taking into consideration the special circumstances and capabilities of the downstream developing countries for environmentally sound management of cumulative plastic waste that they additionally receive from upstream. Mr. Chair, I look forward to having fruitful discussion in this meeting. I believe our collective actions today will shape the well-being of our future generations and the health of our planet. Thank you all.
I thank the representative of Bangladesh, and now I give the floor to the representative of Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excellencies, good afternoon. I would like to thank the Minister Gilbert and the people of Canada for the warm hospitality here in Ottawa. We are at a critical point in the negotiations, and I would like to encourage all member states to bring the same spirit of ambition present when Resolution 514 was adopted at UNEA 5.2. Rwanda would like to thank the Chair for his proposal on the organization of work, and we support this approach. We have no time to waste. We have no time to waste and need to move forward collaboratively and collectively. I would also like to add Rwanda's voice to the African statement and emphasize that the vast majority of African member states support a reduction in plastic production to sustainable levels. I would also like to echo the statement made by Malawi on behalf of the High Ambition Coalition. More than 60 countries of the coalition want to see the most ambitious treaty possible. Our task here in Ottawa is to make progress on the items where we have significant consensus, including problematic and avoidable plastics. The treaty will only be effective if we have global, legally binding, and time-bound targets. In Rwanda, we signed performance contracts known as imihigo as a promise to citizens to achieve the goals we have set together. Let us do the same through this treaty and end plastic pollution together, once and for all. Finally, I would like to humbly request you support for Rwanda and Peru's joint candidature to host the diplomatic conference in Kigali and the Nairobi Action Conference in Lima. The Kigali submission is a collaboration that signifies more than just a combination of our two capitals. It embodies a shared spirit and dedication to drive substantive progress in environmental multilateralism, and we welcome your support, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Rwanda. Now I would like to give the floor to the Russian Federation. Please, Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Dear Mr. Chair, dear delegates, the Russian delegation would like to join all in thanking Canada for organizing this very important meeting. The Russian Federation considers this conference as a crucial step in working out an international agreement. We think it is necessary to focus on finding mutually acceptable solutions of ecological problems of utmost importance. We are dedicated to constructively contribute to moving towards consensus. And we have to express our regret that some delegations try to use this forum for spreading anti-Russian rhetoric. We urge against politicizing of these discussions at this conference, which could undermine the professional character of its work and distract the delegates from solving extremely important problems of plastic pollution. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation, and now I give the floor to the representative of Turkey. Please, Turkey, you have the floor, followed by Argentina.
Thank you, distinguished chair. As it's the first time my delegation takes the floor, I would like to thank the government of Canada for hosting us during INC-4 in Ottawa. Turkey would like to recall that our commitment is to be developing an ambitious and effective ELB regarding the UNEP 5/14 decision in a timely manner. The revised zero draft with 6 chapters, which we will work on in the coming period, is a very comprehensive document that includes different options derived from previous negotiations. There is no hesitation on whether the necessary work will be carried out with the disciplined and efficient work of the working groups, taking into account time constraints. Turkey is confident that everyone will make every effort for a balanced, transparent, viable and inclusive ELB in which national circumstances are taken into account. On the other hand, the legal drafting group, whose establishment was announced in the scenario note, is also welcomed. We would like to point out that the announcement that the legal drafting group will be formed after the INC-4 registrations are closed raises questions about the working principles and mandate of the group. In this context, we would like to emphasize that the mandate, scope of work, and the working principles of this group should be discussed and agreed upon in the plenary. In addition, it is considered useful to design the group in question as an open-ended group so that countries can convey and follow up their own rights. Turkey considers the first main outcome of INC-4 the first reading of the revised zero draft document and then its presentation by the chair prior to INC-5. In addition, an agreed formal intersessional process, program, and content is the most desirable outcome of INC-4. Distinguished Chair, we would like to state that this delegation is ready to make the necessary efforts and work harmoniously to implement UN Resolution 5/14 under your wisdom and guidance. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Turkey. Y ahora le doy la palabra al representante de Argentina. Por favor, tiene la palabra.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I will speak in Spanish. En primer lugar,
first and foremost, please allow me to thank Canada for hosting this fourth meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. We'd also like to thank the Secretariat, and in particular the Chair, Mr. Valdivieso, and his team for preparing this meeting. As we have said in previous meetings, we believe that it will be essential to set out a definition as soon as possible to ensure that states can consider the scope of the commitments being made in these sessions. Some of these can be worked on based on definitions already agreed on in other MEAs. In addition, we would like to highlight the central idea of principal but common differentiated responsibilities and different national capacities given different levels of development. This principle should be considered in a cross-cutting manner across all treaty. In addition, in line with the Principle 2 of the Rio Declaration, Argentina hopes that control measures for plastic products will be considered based on cooperation amongst all states to ensure that we don't harm the specific countries given their different situations. We take into account the trade of different products across the world. In this regard, any measure which is set out for the future instrument needs to be in line with WTO norms. We need to ensure that we don't create unnecessary obstacles for international trade and ensure that measures are based on scientific proof and international standards of reference organizations. On means of implementation, in particular, a financial mechanism to ensure the success of the implementation of the future instrument, we need to have new financial resources and additional ones which are channeled through a specific fund established to that effect in order to ensure that they're accessible and predictable. In addition, we need to ensure that we have capacity building and technology transfer, and that this is established completely clearly under the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, ensuring that all countries can have access to technology and capacity building, in particular developing countries. In this regard, we should highlight that technology transfer should be understood as expressed in the Addis Ababa Action Plan, according to which technology transfer should be in favorable terms for developing countries, including concessional terms and preferential terms, as mutually agreed. In addition, we support the inclusion of an extended producer responsibility for importers and producers to ensure that they consider the entire life cycle of products, in particular for consumption. We also believe it's important to consider traceability as a tool for each country so that they can nationally monitor the collection and distribution of plastics and their consumption in line with any prohibited uses of specific materials. Finally, we'd like to express that Argentina reiterates its commitment to this process, which was begun during UNEP 5, in order to agree on this instrument. Thank you.
Agradezco al representante.
I thank the representative of Argentina, and now give the floor to the representative of Cuba. Cuba, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, Cuba would like to thank you for the enormous efforts made in order to ensure a successful meeting. We'd also like to thank the Government of Canada for their warm welcome, in particular in granting requests for visas from my country. I would like to repeat the position which we have expressed in previous meetings, We will make use to the best possible extent of the time available to us. We would like to highlight specific points. We don't have much time to achieve a clean text, agreed upon text for the treaty. Therefore, we need to be realistic in the coming days. We need to understand in a collective manner the specificities of each of our countries and consider how we can work in an objective manner to ensure that most countries can ensure that they sign up to the future treaty. On the date of the diplomatic Conference of Plenipotentiaries, we need to ensure that this is set out once we have clarity on this text. Therefore, we hope that we can set out dates at INC-5. We can have constructive and frank debates here with our contact groups, and we need to consider different options for the text without losing sight of any of the existing options. Nevertheless, we have to dedicate time to clarifying specific terms which are essential in order to move forwards. For example, problematic and avoidable plastic products. We need a common understanding of these products, and if not, we won't be able to agree on how to regulate them. Finally, we reiterate the need to have a fund dedicated specifically to the implementation of any new instrument. Thank you. I thank the representative of Cuba.
Floor to the representative of India. India, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank the INC Chair for making all efforts to make INC-4 a success. As we all know, that after lengthy deliberations at INC-3, the zero draft was updated to include the submission made by parties. Our delegation would urge that the negotiations at INC-4 are done in a transparent and inclusive manner. All views need to be heard. We would also like to state that as much as possible, no more than 2 meetings should be organized for undertaking substantive negotiations. This will allow wider participation of the member states. We would also like to reiterate our stand that negotiations on the revised draft text should be in line with the UNEP Resolution 5/14 that we all had collectively adopted. The instrument should focus on the mandate of UNEP 5/14 resolution, which is to end plastic pollution. The utility of plastic in modern society is well recognized, with its uses in various sectors of the economy, and the INC should work towards developing an instrument to end plastic pollution. The coverage of substances, materials, products as required must be related to addressing plastic pollution. The scope of the instrument should be circumscribed by the Rio Principle 12, which emphasizes that trade policy measures for environmental purposes should not constitute a means of arbitrary or unjustifiable discrimination or a disguised restriction on international trade. The instrument must be based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. The legally binding instrument should address plastic pollution by addressing the availability, accessibility, affordability of alternatives, including cost implications, and by specifying arrangements for capacity building and technical assistance, technology transfer, and financial assistance. Further, the cost of environmental benefits of alternative polymers also need to be considered. The obligations under the instrument shall be linked directly with the availability of adequate and predictable financial and technical resources for developing countries, and this should be made a part of the substantive provisions. A country-driven approach needs to be adopted for addressing plastic pollution. At the 4th session of INC, we all need to work together with collective spirit and in an inclusive manner in order to address the global environmental challenges of plastic pollution. Thank you so much.
I thank the representative from India, and now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Iraq. Iraq, you have the floor.
Shukran, Sayyid al-Rais.
Thank you so much, sir. Allow me to start by conveying our position to you We wish to back the statement made by the representative of Palestine on behalf of the Asia-Pacific region. We'd also like to back the statement made by the representative of Kuwait, who spoke on behalf of the OMCs. We'd also like to back the statement made by Bangladesh. Statement aimed at protecting transboundary rivers from plastic pollution, especially in downstream countries. Based on our commitment to not make lengthy statements, we would like to very briefly underscore the importance of the Rio Principle contained in the Rio Declaration, underscoring the natural sovereignty of states when it comes to using their natural resources. Iraq also wishes to continue to focus on the preservation of health, the health of all of our citizens. We'd also like to clearly define the toxic impact of these plastic substances. This is something that is very important, and this is in keeping with UNEA resolution, the UNEA resolution regarding the life cycle of plastic substances. And all of this must be done without prejudice to the interests of developing states. I thank you, sir.
I thank the representative of Iraq. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Kazakhstan. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for affording me the floor. Kazakhstan wishes to convey its gratitude to the INC as well as to the Canadian government for having organized our discussion on such an important document. We recognize the need to regulate the issue on environmentally conscious management of plastic waste based on the volumes of plastic waste around the world and the risk of them falling into the environment, including the marine environment. We back the fact that we need to create an international document based on the Rio de Janeiro Declaration principles on the environment and development, as well as mindful of national specificities. We back an effort to develop an international document mindful of national capabilities, especially on the use of single-use plastic, as well as recycling of plastics, and work on the design, production of plastics throughout its life cycle, and also labeling such production. Within the framework of negotiation processes, Kazakhstan, just as other members of the negotiation process, back conducting them in a spirit of consensus and cooperation. We also believe that it is useful to reject parallel discussions, as every section of the draft text plays a very important role within our discussions. All issues which require further clarification and discussions we're requiring to the measures of implementation of the treaty, as well as financial measures and the structures for the implementation. We also have technical support for projects within the agreement is based on research, scientifically accessible technologies, as well as technology transfer, the involvement of experts to provide reviews regarding the situation of implementation of the treaty, and similar such activities. To overcome duplication, incongruities within the provisions of the agreement is something that is very important. We also need to bear in mind the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions when we do this. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Kazakhstan, and now I give the floor to the representative of Malaysia. Malaysia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thanks to Canada for hosting INC-4, and also to the Chairman and Secretariat of INC. Plastic pollution is one of the most pressing issues globally. It is a crisis that has reached a critical point, posing significant threats to ecosystem, the environment, and human health. Malaysia supports the aspiration to curb plastic pollution by addressing the full life cycle of plastic as mandated by Resolution 514 of United Nations Environment Assembly 5.2 or UNEA 5.2. Malaysia stands firm in our belief that our nation knows its needs best. The treaty must be country-driven, allowing us to set targets and actions that align with our unique circumstances. Currently, Malaysia has implemented the Malaysia Plastic Sustainability Roadmap 2021 to 2023 and Malaysia's Roadmap towards Zero Single-Use Plastic 2018 to 2030. These policies are the national commitment and it is aligned with the global intention of instrument. Malaysia's path to sustainability cannot be dictated. It must be determined nationally, ensuring a just transition that respects our developmental pace. Malaysia calls for the instrument to be shaped in a balanced and fair approach without impeding our rights to exploit and utilize our natural resources for our economic development. In this respect, the scope of the treaty ought not to include extraction of fossil fuel, as this raw material is also used mainly for other industrial production apart from plastic production. Correspondingly, blanket restriction to production and supply of primary plastic polymers and chemicals without considering market demand and availability of affordable and safe alternatives will shackle our rights to development and might bring unintended adverse effects to our economy and society. Thus, Malaysia proposes for a facilitative and encouraging methodology rather than imposition of abrupt legislative controls, such as encouragement of production of circular polymers that would produce the similar result of reduction in production of virgin polymers. With that, thank you.
I thank the representative from Malaysia. Now I would like to give the floor to the representative of Kenya. Please, you have the floor, Kenya.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair, on giving Kenya this opportunity. Kenya thanks Canada for hosting this important meeting, and we are equally grateful to the Chair for the able manner in which you are steering INC-4 meeting. We wish you the best in your aspirations as you steer the world towards a global agreement on plastic. Kenya aligns itself to the statement made by the African group. We appreciate we have come from very far, and we are glad that this meeting is going to work and focus on the revised draft text. We are happy that the revised draft text is comprehensive enough and has taken consultative meetings to achieve it. We urge parties to transition quickly to make these ideas into draft legal text during this INC-4. Chair, we support your proposed scenario note and urge that we quickly work towards its implementation. We believe that the breakaway groups provide further opportunity for member states to input into the text to ensure that their issues are well integrated. On this note, we request that we proceed and establish the legal drafting group to commence the development of the real text. Kenya proposes that we exercise maximum flexibility to ensure that we make progress quickly. We appreciate that there will be areas of disagreement, but not all the text. Hence, we propose that all areas of agreement be branched out as we move forward. We thank you, Chair.
I thank the representative from Kenya and distinguished delegates. With this statement concludes the list of speakers from members, and this brings us to the end of our first plenary meeting. We will resume our consideration of agenda item 4 this afternoon at 3 p.m. This plenary meeting is now adjourned.